We need to get an external mic. No, we don't.
If we get to that point, that'll be interesting.
A full-on podcast.
I know. All right. First question: What type of strength and conditioning should combat athletes do? Cardio, HIIT, weights, yoga. Do I have to mix it up between the different types?
Are we hot? Is the mic
We're hot.
Okay, the mic's hot. All right, I'll lead. I'll take the A on this.
I got strong opinions on this.
You got
shit.
strong opinion?
I
All right. So I have a really broad, I have an easy answer for this. And my thing when it comes to strength and conditioning, I have only two rules. Do what makes you feel good, which makes your body durable to endure your grappling practice. And the second rule is do it far away from your training. So I break it up. Do your strength and conditioning in the morning, your grappling at night, or reverse. But I don't like strength and conditioning right before training because the likelihood of you getting injured increases exponentially. I can talk about personal preference when it comes to strength and conditioning, where I'm at right now. Me personally right now, I'm focusing more so on gymnastic movements, being good with my body weight. I'm not doing too much yoga, but being mobile. That's what I'm focused on right now. I don't think there's an ideal strength and conditioning system for combat or for anything you do in life. I think that if you're doing what makes you feel good and you are increasing your flexibility, your strength, how good you feel, your ability to perform, you're doing the right thing. So whatever you gravitate to. I know competitors who only do yoga who are very strong and very flexible. I know competitors who lift extremely heavy weights and they're fairly successful. So if there's someone that has zero base, I say get a trainer, right? If you have something that you enjoy but you don't feel as though it's right for grappling, you may need to do some modifications, but at the end of the day, if you enjoy that and you're going to do it consistently, then stay at it.
I think in simplest terms, you should get good at everything. It's just like jiu-jitsu. You need to pass, you need to sweep, you need to submit from the guard, you need, takedowns and throws. That said, you should work your weakness. If you grew up doing gymnastics, you're light years ahead on people in that regard. Or if you're a power lifter coming into jiu-jitsu, you don't need to be deadlifting and bench pressing, I don't think. I like the CrossFit methodology, which is kind of the same thing, get good at everything. But if you got Gumby flexibility, you should maintain that and pick up a barbell. Work your weakness, honestly assess your weaknesses and it's just like jiu-jitsu. If you suck at passing and you're a guard puller, you should be learning some takedowns and passing, and make that a strong point.
If you want me to get uppity on the subject, which some people like me to get uppity on the subject, I personally think you should increase your VO2 max, right? That's one thing that's measurable, right? Your ability to perform endurance exercise, and there are things you can do to increase your VO2 max. I think there should be some component of strength training, regardless if that's what's your body weight, that's what a barbell, that's CrossFit. I think there should be some component of that, and there should be some component of recovery and mobility. Right? You have to be taking care of your body. Those who train with me and under me know that I'm very serious about not getting injured, and I think that those things will allow you to perform at an optimal level, both in practice and both in competition. Right? If you're durable in practice, right? Like during this break, one thing I don't like is some people say, "Oh, I'm not training for competition, so I'm not doing my strength and conditioning," but then you come in the room and get injured. Right? It's like greasing the grooves, right? You got to do something every single day so your body is durable to endure a training, right? And that's just my personal, if you want me to get uppity on strength and conditioning, that's my personal opinion on it.
Can you talk a little bit about those three categories that you mentioned? Because one thing that I have noticed among the students is they have a very strong preference towards one of the three. You have people who say, I don't lift any weights because that causes they've heard that it causes injuries. So I only do stretching and yoga. You have people who only want to do cardio and you know, they have these set preferences,
Yeah.
and I'm of the opinion of the same as you, where it's sort of like you have to do all of them because you have to be within striking range of your peer group. So if you're not strong enough, like if somebody grabs you and you're not strong enough, you're going to have a problem. Like a featherweight female,
Minimum requirement.
yeah, like a featherweight female, if she gets a ultra heavy male in a triangle, the chance that she finishes the triangle, very, very low. But there are probably, like if you took a ultra heavy white belt who maybe never trained and you put him against an ultra heavy world champion and he puts the same triangle on, he might not be within the strength range to be able to finish that person. So,
Okay, so
yeah, talk a little bit about the categories.
So to recap, the question is why do I find those three components important? If you look at grappling, wrestling, judo, MMA, although there are spurts of explosion, it's mostly an endurance sport, right? And there's both endurance and mental toughness that goes into grappling and combat. And I feel as though if you are doing cardio, if you're increasing your VO2 max, one, you're doing some kind of steady state or variable exercise for a long period of time. It creates a practice of getting to your flow state, right? That's why I personally like cardio. Now, what I do isn't necessarily for everyone. I do long runs, right? But I run slow, right? And the reason I run slow is I don't want to lose my hamstring, so I can stay explosive. So I have a lot of whys. Now, why lift weights? A lot of people don't like lifting weights. They feel like it causes injuries. It makes them stiff. It makes them sore. But when it comes to building an endurable body for grappling and striking, you have to have a strong body. The reason you build your quads is to protect your knees, right? I feel as though if you don't build your quads, you're not going to protect your knees. If you don't have a strong motor unit, what I always call your hips, your butt, your lower abdominals, you're not going to be able to come up, right? Or throw, right? And it's not going. And then for our strikers, there's not going to be any power behind your punches if you're weak in the core. So I think there is a place for strength training. And then when it comes to mobility and recovery, you have to take care of your body, right? If you want to do this for a long time at a high level, if you want to be 12 years in and still cartwheeling and still turning upside down in your neck and doing flying techniques, if you want to be doing that later in your years, you have to take care of your body. That's why recovery and mobility is important, and you'll find yourself getting less injured. The more days that you can string together on the mat, the more successful you're going to be as both a grappler and a striker or a mixed martial artist.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree at all with that. The mobility is really important, and I'm no spring chicken, so the self massage and stretching is critical. I would add, as far as cycling stuff, and it's less of an issue now when tournaments aren't happening. But 4 weeks out from a major tournament, you should not be doing strength work. You should be doing lighter weight circuits and sprints and swinging the kettlebell or whatever. But now's a good time to be doing strength work if you've never done strength work and there's no major tournaments. Yeah, it's going to impact your cardio a little bit, so you're going to feel it rolling, but now's a good time to be doing strength work, I would say.
If it's a deficiency, if it's a deficiency, or if you're injured, right? You got to keep that body fundamentally strong. It's part of being an athlete. Timmy and I would always have that conversation about being an athlete versus being a jiu-jitsu player, and neither one is. I think there's some blend in the middle, because you can be extremely athletic and be terrible at grappling, but you will be immensely more successful if you train like an athlete and do grappling.
Cool. Second question, and the third question, sort of related, so let's do the first one. How do I know if I've sufficiently mastered a technique or system and it's time to move on? And the follow-up was, what's the balance between getting good at an existing skill set and acquiring new skills?
I'll lead. I feel that those questions are very similar. So this sometimes can be hard to measure, but you've mastered a technique if you can execute that technique on a majority of your training partners at your belt level. So 4 out of 5. We want to be batting at least 80% where you can execute this technique on 4 out of 5 of people of your belt and size that you encounter. That's my personal opinion on it. As you start getting more high level, like when I wrestle the guys from the Navy Wrestling Club, you know, if I'm getting to my sweep single, then I know my sweep single is fairly good because I'm probably a blue or purple belt in wrestling, and these guys are black belts. But that's kind of the way I measure if it's successful. Now, when it's time to move on, I think that you shouldn't make a huge diversion from what you're doing. I just think you should build on top of that. So where can we go next from that movement? Just the natural progression. I think that's where you should go next. But I think you move on, or you've shown some mastery once you can do it on 4 out of 5, training partner, same belt, similar size.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's like if you're a blue belt and you can hit the same technique over and over again on blue belts and white belts. At that point, it does you no good to do the same thing just to tap the same person. You need to move on, and building on it's great because now you roll with a purple belt and he shuts your shit down instantly. That's when you talk to your coaches and what's the next step from A doesn't work anymore. I can do A to white belts and blue belts most of the time. It comes to a screeching halt against purple belts. Where do I go from there?
Can you guys talk a little bit more about building upon the system versus like maybe addressing a weakness, you know, or filling a gap? Because those are a little bit different approaches. So
Yeah.
Well, filling the gap, that might be a little bit more obvious when you roll with advanced people because they're gonna take advantage of any hole in your game.
So when I say building upon, at this point, I feel like you should take a strategic approach to what you're doing. So let's say let's use the example, you have a good ankle pick, right? You have a good ankle pick, you can hit 4 out of 5 of your belt and close to your weight, right? What do you do next, right? Well, I don't want you landing in close guard, right? So what's a natural progression after you pick the ankle? Maybe now we need to work on the leg drag, right? So you don't have to necessarily practice leg dragging from your ankle pick, but you become proficient at leg dragging a static opponent or a guard playing opponent. And then as you start feeling once you get your ankle pick and then you enter into an open guard situation, you start working towards your leg drag right away. That's kind of that's one thought or how I would build it. Just naturally, I like the ankle pick, and when you come up, you don't want to fall into close guard, which like Oscar's been ankle picking me lately, but he always ends up in my close guard. So that's one way that I would build. When they talk about filling a hole, I think you put yourself in that position in a drilling situation over and over and over again, and you master the technique without resistance. And then once you've mastered it without resistance, you put 50% resistance. And then once you're pretty good at 50%, then you work it up to 80. And then if you are able to control your rolls and you end up in that position in a roll against active resistance, you want to be able to execute that technique. So that's how I would fill a hole versus build out a game.
I can't say anything better than that. That's good.
I just bring that up because I feel like a lot of people sort of randomly select what they want to work on based on an absence of knowledge rather than what they need. An example I would give is, like if we go off what you said, let's say that I'm a wrestler, so to build off of my game, what I should be doing is learning to pass the guard, maybe like throw the legs, leg drags, and then once I pass Americana, Munson choke, Kimura system, front headlocks, stuff that fits very easily into my wrestling game. So I'm building off that. When do I do that versus when do you tell the wrestler, you just got to start on your back, right? Because one is like filling the gap and one is building out your system, right?
I think you would focus on your strengths closer to a tournament for sure. You know, when there's no tournament in the near future, that's when you should be working your weakness. That's when you make the wrestler work all his back.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But what I would do initially, if I were, let's say I'm just trying to build a champion. Say it's Little Todd, my son, right? And he gravitates towards wrestling, but of course he's going to be doing submission grappling too. If that's the way he approaches the game, then I'm going to build a front headlock and Americana Kimura system for him initially. He's going to do that through blue belt. He's probably going to do that through blue belt to a high level blue belt. And there's going to come a point where he's exceptionally proficient. He's mastered those wrestling, quote unquote, wrestling type techniques. And then we're going to put him on his back, right? And that's personally what I think. Like if I had a wrestler and they don't want to put their back on the mat, I'm not going to force their back on the mat initially. I'm going to, and I say all that to build the confidence, right? Once you build their confidence that they can finish or they can do what they want to do on top and always be on top, they're going to, and you know you can always fight back to the top, they're going to be more comfortable putting themselves on their back and embracing that game. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't force them to their back initially unless they came in and said, I want to be a guard player.
Cool. Next question. What is the appropriate intensity level in sparring?
Okay. I'm taking a mic on this, so I'll go first. So I do have a very concise answer when it comes to sparring. I believe that in order to have effective training, that you are training at 80%, right? If you're going 80%, you alleviate tension, you will not burn yourself out as fast, right? And you will be able to have both a good workout and a technical session, right?
Safer too.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's a reason, in my personal opinion, right? And other people may have all different opinions, but in my personal opinion, I'm able to do the highlight type moves and the high flying moves. My partners aren't scared because I'm never going 100%, right? So if you go 80%, right, that is still a strenuous training, right? You are still going hard. I feel like when you're going 100%, 90%, you're in berserker mode, right? Where you don't know if your technique is working. You might just be out hustling your partner, or your physical attributes are winning the role for you versus you out techniquing someone. So, and I always use the example that when Usain Bolt, you know, the fastest man in the world until he retired, when he would run world records, his coach would tell him, "I need you to run 80%. And if you feel like you're running 80%, you're going 100, you're relaxed, you're going to win. You're going to run world record times." So I think it's about 80%.
Yeah, it's in that ballpark for sure. It's coming down a notch just for safety's sake. I mean, you know, if you're mounted and you're trying to escape, okay, so what? You're bridging at 100% or your elbow escaping at 100%. That's okay. But if it's I'm going to armbar this blue belt for the first time ever, you shouldn't be at 100% just because somebody's going to get hurt, or you're close on a takedown and they don't want to be taken down by you because they win most of the wrestling matches with you, and now somebody gets their knee jacked up. So 80% is a good one.
And I mean, the one mantra I use is you never want a technique so much that you're willing to injure your partner in training.
Exactly, absolutely.
In training. And you know, I get pushback from one of my students about that because my student feels as though they are not building confidence if they're not finishing their partner in the room. And in all honesty, especially in like an advanced room, in order to finish certain people, you have to break certain people. And you have to develop the mentality and the confidence to break in competition without breaking your partner in the room. Because if the only way I can beat Young is to always toe hold Young, and then I don't have Young to train with, I don't have the proper people in the room to get ready for competition, right? And I think that mental game of knowing, of believing and understanding how to break but not having to do it in a room is important. Because instead of having to finish in a room, you have the confidence to know that you can finish, right? And I think that's very important.
Can you talk a little bit about how you define 80%? Because I think that there's a lot of discrepancy in what people's opinions of 80% and 100% are.
Yeah.
You see that across all the sports. You always see people like in striking, they get mad because they say they're gonna go they always think that the other person is hitting them really hard, you know?
80% is relative. You know, if you got a stud athlete, his 80% may be more than an average person's 110%. You know, so you can't go, oh, coach just said go 80%. That means I should be beating your ass now. Well, no, you're a purple belt and I'm a white belt. You're still going to be in complete control.
So what is the mindset of an 80%? So let's say I'm in an 80% training mindset. I'm in that ideal mindset. What are the characteristics of that?
Okay, so I have a couple, I know I come up with these weird idiosyncrasies when it talks about some of these principles I have, because 80%, like that is so relative to say, I need you to train at 80%. But when you're training 80%, in my opinion, you don't hear your own heartbeat, right? That's my thing. You shouldn't hear your own heartbeat, and you don't have tunnel vision. So if Malcolm is speaking a sentence to me, I don't look at him, but I can still hear him, right? But I'm still hustling, right? I'm probably still sweating. I'm pushing myself, right? But I don't want to hear my heart beating, and I don't want to pant, right? If I hear my heart beating or I'm panting, I'm pushing, I'm forcing it, right? I'm not understanding how to hit the gas and drive through the curves, to use a racing car reference. You know, those are the couple of things that I look for. And when I'm training someone to be able to go hard, but not hurt themselves and not exert themselves, I'll say things like, I can hear your heart beating, or you're panting, control your breath. And those small keys I give to help people be able to perform at a high level or go hard without overexerting or hurting themselves. So there's a couple of things I look at when I tell some people to go 80%. And the one thing that Phil said is never want a technique to the point that you're going to hurt somebody, right?
I would say, yeah, that's good stuff. Can you hear and understand coaches on the sideline telling you to do something? If you're so, like you said, tunnel vision on escaping this submission or hitting this technique, that everything the coach on the sideline says is just mumble.
Yeah.
You're going too hard.
To use the striking reference, if you get popped and your reaction didn't return fire right away, but your reaction is to bite down on your mouthpiece and start swinging as hard as you can, that's when you have tunnel vision and you're going too hard. You're doing the Cody Garbrandt, right? You got emotional, right? That's the other thing. It can't get emotional, right? That's how you know that you're not above 80%. If you shouldn't get emotional on what's going on. You should be able to think clearly about what your technique is. And once you're in the habit of thinking clearly through what technique is next, it becomes reactionary, right? Like my whole thing about Kayla active posting is becoming reactionary. Once she gets put down, immediately her hand goes to the mat and her hips are coming up. Even if she don't get up, you know, she thought through that. So that's the one thing. You should be able to think through technique to develop habit. And that's how you know you're going hard enough in training.
I like that analogy of, I like what you're saying, because you want to be able to have communication with the outside world.
Yes.
It's sort of like that match where, you know how they say you keep the track of the score in your head? You know, and then you have that match where you lost, you're like, what is the score? You know that match, you weren't operating at, you know, you've gone a little bit too far into the moment. So, let me follow up with that. Is there a place for 100%, for the higher intensity training? If so, what is it?
I think there is going to be a time where you're going above 80%. And I think that's more of an environment than a norm, right? I think that's more of an environment than a norm. I'll use an example. I put you in Byung's lasso, I put you in Roberto Terralvez's lasso, and you're going to go.
I was going to say positional.
Yeah, 30 second go. You go as hard as you can to pass. Now, when I say go as hard as you can, I'm very specific. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? You have to have practice movements that you're going to do over and over again. There's muscle memory, right? You have to certain things you have to do to be able to go fast. Because if you're clunky, if you don't know where you're going to trip over yourself. You know, it's like running with your chest over your feet. Eventually, you're going to go down. right? But I think short positional spurts is when you want to go hard, right? Especially if you're put in a situation where no one's going to get injured. I'm not going to put Navarro and Jeremy 8 feet away from each other, and I want you guys to go 100% in a wrestling match. You know, now I may put the single. You know, I give Jeremy a single, and now you got to put Navarro down. Right? That's a different story. You know, because now you can go 100%. The likelihood of them getting their legs intertangled is a lot less. So, but positional, I think that's the time where you can go.
Yeah, positionally, small doses.
What about in training camps?
Like,
So
for MMA or?
well, I just mean 100%. Is there a time? Well, I would say for a person, there's never a time for 100%, but 95. When would you say?
Well, let's be honest about being able to exert that kind of effort. You can't do it for an extended period of time.
Right.
Right? So let me fill this in spurts. So I see more so if you're doing hard sparring for an MMA match, right? Then there are going to be there may be a 15, 20 second burst if someone can sustain that long where you are throwing with everything behind it, you know, with the proper gear in place. Wrestling. You know, when we start in positional and on a single, we got to finish. You know, there's a time to go 100% because that person's prepared to defend that single as well. I think when it's open sparring, I think if you're going anything above 80%, it's gonna get sloppy. And like you always say, I try to always say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. If it's not smooth, you're not getting anywhere, right? That's
And maybe less so like in a neutral position, right? If you're in a dominant position, you're mounted. I can go 100% trying to cross choke somebody with safely, but finishing a takedown, maybe not as much. Executing a throw, maybe not, because that's where the injuries happen. So that's positionally. Coaches didn't put you in that position. You earned that mount position, but it's safe to go 100% for a choke there, I think.
So we're talking about 100% exertion within the moment. What about in terms of fatigue? When you know, so we're when we talk about 100%, like you're just exhausted, right? And there's that 100% on like the negative side, on the endurance side. Whereas I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is how hard do we do the technique from an exertion side. So they're sort of different. What are your thoughts on, do you ever train to full exhaustion?
Oh, okay.
You know, like maybe the person means 100% like that. Like, should I leave the mat like dead?
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Should I empty the tank?
Yes.
Every training session.
Not every training session. I occasionally, yeah, but you should always leave a little in the gas tank, I would think.
I personally think
Maybe
no.
not much.
Yeah, I don't
Not much, but
yeah.
maybe a little.
I would use you know, you should always be able to do 2 more reps, right? There are going to be those sessions where you feel dead, and maybe because I'm a very high belt, the way I approach practice is me personally, I think you should be able to get up and do it again the next day. So I don't like emptying the tank, even if I have to go hard, right? Because you know, I play around and say I'm the king of the ultra heavies. I only train with the big boys. Even if you're going hard, you should not. I don't feel like you need to empty the tank, right? You should be able to get up off the mat. You should be able to walk. You should be able to have a conversation. But part of that, I take that back to part of your preparation, right? If your cardio is prepared, if you're doing your cardio and your strength and conditioning, a 90-minute session shouldn't take everything out of you, right? I mean, unless you're getting hit, unless you're getting wobbled, unless you're getting, I don't think it should take it out of you. I think my thing is you should be able to go for an hour straight with short breaks, like until grappling, that's what I do. You should be able to go for an hour straight with short breaks, right? Not get injured and feel good after. You know, you might be a little tired, a little fatigued, right? And exertion is relative, right? I think Byung, he's one of my good training partners. I think he exerts more energy than I do when we train. But I think you should be able to walk off the mat.
So, tell me how what I'm about to say fits into what you guys are saying. I think that there is a time, especially for the newer athletes, where they have to feel not 100% intensity, but they have to feel that they have to feel the full exertion and they have to feel the full exhaustion. Right? If you never, I agree with you guys, like you should be able to practice the next day. And what I'm trying to get to is, when is that time you know how we say you occasionally do it.
Yeah.
What is its purpose? So
It lets you feel. I mean, you got to get used to that. You got to know what that feels like, and know that you can go to that point and beyond. But I mean, that happens with white belts and blue belts anyways, just because they got no throttle control. It's just drag race at all times, and that's why 2 minutes in they're just wiped.
right.
So it happens to those guys just organically, I think.
Well, so you have to be able, when you talk about mental toughness, you have to be able to thrive when you have to go to your dark place, right? I think that is important, an important skill to learn, right? So there are going to be times when you didn't have the best day, the best setup, the best nutrition, and you got to come in and you still got to do what you're supposed to do, and you may hit that dark place. I hit it Monday night, right? Nutrition wasn't the best Monday night. I haven't been doing the late class. I taught a private, right? Stress at work, get on through a promotion, and then all of a sudden I come back in the room and I just get the heavy hitters, and I'm not feeling good. Stomach's not feeling good. And sometimes you have to go to that dark place. I'm a black belt. No one would have judged me for taking it easy, right? But sometimes you have to go to that dark place to know what you're made of, right? Where you do that 10-minute session when you're maybe squeezing your cheeks because your stomach don't feel good, but you're still performing at a high level, and then you're exhausted after. I know Monday night my heart rate was much beyond where I get not even on a mediocre day. Much beyond that. And especially after my first round, I didn't know if I was going to be able to keep finishing, finish the rest of the 40 minutes of our sparring. But sometimes you got to go to that dark place to know that you can persevere, right? So it's okay. You don't need to feel inadequate because you end up in that dark place. You got to struggle through it. You got to be comfortable with it. And then once that's normal, it's no longer a dark place, right? And then once you build that threshold, and it's harder and harder for you to get to your dark place, you're doing good as a human being. And not only as a grappler, as a striker, when your dark place is hard to get to, you're doing a good job.
Right. Each time you go to the dark place gets redefined a little bit further away. So there is a necessity throughout your jiu-jitsu journey that you do face those kind of times. Although the regularity of it doesn't have to be regular. I believe that part of the jiu-jitsu journey is having to at least go through that a couple times. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and it hits what you were talking about at the end of class. You mentioned Jocko and all those special recon ninja SEAL forces. That's high-speed military stuff. It's always about going there and can you work through it. I mean, jiu-jitsu is no different,
And sometimes you can end up in your dark place through frustration, right? And that's part of it too. Sometimes it's just not the physical ailments or fatigue. It's frustration. It's you are the nail that day. It's your combinations or your jiu-jitsu is just not working, right? None of your ducks and sweep singles are touching legs, right? Or it's too slippery, right? Sometimes that's what puts you in your dark place, and that mental frustration can make you more fatigued. But you can learn to live with that, right? I think one of the biggest thing, your question, this is not specific to this question, but something that I get asked often is how have I dealt with losing at the highest level before I won at the highest level. And the biggest thing for me is realizing that, and where I can bring this full circle, is that nothing in my life changed when I lost in a round of 8 at every tournament, right? My girl then, now my wife still loved me. Everyone still thought I was good at jiu-jitsu. Nothing changed, right? So when you circle back to self-love, right? When you go to that dark place or you have a bad day or you're not hitting your techniques, say you're the sweep single king and you can't get one off. No one's gonna look at you different about your sweep single, right? And once you have that confidence that bad days happen and you're comfortable with that, not to say that every day should be a bad day, you're gonna both grow as a person and as a competitor, right? And you're gonna see things start to go your way.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Those are the questions?
Yep.